they also have conducted many studies in the tribal areas, and which is they have compiled, I mean, from their compilations actually have taken this, that is their overall intake, the food intake, overall food intake, they call it the RDA, that is the recommended dietary allowance. So everybody has a certain RDA, and everybody should eat according to that RDA, but they eat less. I mean, if you look at the RDA compared to RDA, they eat very less, and that is the quantity. I mean, I'm talking about the quantity is less. Then the intake of nutrients is also less, because the quantity itself is less, and whatever they eat is not really the nutrition, they are not there. And the intake of micronutrients basically is very less in their diet. So together all these 3-4 points, there is a food gap basically. So among adults it is there, and then it is percolated to their children also, and that food gap actually continues. Just for I thought that is, I'll just share this data. That is the prevalence of hypertension. The study is conducted in 9 states. Maharashtra is one of the states. So among when I'm saying the pooled states, those 9 states together, the prevalence of hypertension among the males is 25.2%, and for Maharashtra it is higher, that is 7.5%. Whereas for females, the pooled prevalence is 23.1%, but for Maharashtra fortunately it is less, 19.3%. So, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Prashant Mansuri. I am faculty at Berkeley Institute of Politics and Economics. I'll be giving you some facts about tribal development and the status of tribes, particularly in Maharashtra, and which has certainly some kind of implications in terms of budgetary allocations. So, a group approach or an individual approach, and also an area-based approach for tribal development in the country, and especially in the Maharashtra state as such. And therefore we have 2 types of areas which are demarcated, that is the tribal subplan areas and the outside the tribal subplan areas. Around the population, whole tribal population in tribal subplan areas is about 50.6%. And in the outside tribal subplan area, it is around 49.4%. The administration and development of the tribal development in Maharashtra is done through the Tribal Development Commissionerate, which is based at Nasik. And there are about 29 project offices in Maharashtra spread over various districts, and there are 45 tribes as per the 2011 census. And out of that, there are 3 particularly vulnerable tribal groups, as they are called as per the new nomenclature. And these there are 3 particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So we have Katkari, Madhya Gaon, and Kolams. Now, do we give an some kind of weightage in budgetary allocation for the particularly vulnerable tribal groups? That is one of the submission to this audience, that it constitutes around 1,20,000 families roughly in Maharashtra. Why I am saying this roughly, because there is no particular data on especially Madhya Gawns. And I had tough time with the tribal department then to say that there are around 1,20,000 tribals and around 80 to 90,000 families of Madhya Gawns, because there is no separate enumeration for Madhya Gawns especially. So why I am saying this is that in these 29 project offices, you talk of disparate kind of development in terms of tribes, and also in terms of the area development. There are around 20 to 30% of tribal padas which are inactive. So Bamragarh constitutes the area where there is extremely low literacy level as per this benchmark survey. So in terms of occupation, you have 50% of those who are doing agriculture, and all of them, 99% of them have very less than 2 hectares of land, and that's also derived type of land, non-irrigated type of lands. We are having kacha type of houses. In terms of education, you have as stated 36.6% were literates, and amongst the literates just 16.8% were educated till the 4th standard, and very few were graduates and those who had were possessing professional and vocational education. The proportionate of children above the age of 6 which were not going in school was around 58%, and significantly of girls was much higher than this. And an assessment of the schemes and the programs which were run by the Tribal Development Department, the benchmark survey talks about that only 66% of people have availed the schemes, whatever tribal schemes and programs are there, and around 34% has not received any kind of schemes. The main reason being the lack of awareness on part of the tribal.
They have highlighted a few significant aspects which I mentioned on this. One, they have highlighted widespread prevalence of problems in health and education. They have highlighted inadequacy of spending. They have highlighted inadequacy of policy. And they have highlighted inadequacy of allocations. Now, with the context of these 3 or 4 broad patterns that have emerged, we are all happy to have with us Mr. Jayant Patil, who has a long experience as the finance minister, as the person who actually does these allocations. And so, I would request him to sort of dwell upon the findings so far from the other side of the table. So what are the actual practical difficulties in making these allocations? What are the difficulties in spending? And how does he look at the whole process? And especially what needs to be done in order to make this whole exercise more meaningful and more effective and more delivery oriented and people friendly.
Otherwise it will be a once more, I think you're sitting here since morning. 2 o'clock.
I think there is a question at the end. Can we? Yeah.
I'm Kamini. I'm Kamini and I work with UNICEF in the social policy unit. I just wanted to know from you, since you have such a long experience, as to what has been the impact of the 14th Finance Commission on the various areas of the budget, especially the centrally sponsored schemes have taken a big hit. And if you consider Manrega or SSA or any of these schemes, we feel the impact at the field level. But what is the kind of approach that the government has taken after the devolution of funds from the central to state? We would like to know.
Take all the questions and then.
No, one by one is better. What has happened is Union government wisely said that from devolution of taxes, we want to increase the share of all the states. So they raised that level from 32% to 42%. But they were not clear for almost 10 to 12 months what schemes will go with that devolution, additional devolution to the state. So there was a lot of confusion in the first year after Union Finance Minister declared that. Almost 1 year, most of the schemes, like drinking water schemes, whether the states were to take up those schemes from their own funds, or Government of India was to make provision for those schemes. That was not clear. So the first financial year of this government, there was a lot of confusion about the 14 Finance Commission's receivables to all the states in India. That, to a certain extent, and most of the schemes which are social in nature, they have said that the state should take care of those schemes. Now the 10% amount which is received by all the states and the responsibilities which have come to the states, they are not matching. And naturally it will affect eventually the social sectors in all the states.
I'm Praveen Mahajan. I have two different questions. The first thing is that I've been with the civil societies for a long time, almost a little more than 3 decades. And last few decades there have been always a demand all over the country that for education, the minimum spending should be at least 6% of the GDP, or in case of state, let me say it as GDP. Similarly for health, it is 3% of the GDP. Invariably we find that we do not make, no budget has ever made that kind of allocation. I would like to understand what are the difficulties in making allocation. Because earlier we used to say that we are a developing country, we are a poor country, we don't really have the resources. But I don't need to tell you that our annual budget has actually exceeded 2 lakh crores of the state itself. So we are not really that poor a country, number one. Number two, I always wonder that this country as well as this state has got best of the brains. They were brought in various capacities, yet the impact on poverty and the impact on poor is extremely poor. So what in your opinion could really help them? I mean, what needs to be done? Because many times I feel that people are deciding those who do not really know of what to decide. They are not the bearers, so they don't really know where the shoe is pinching. So our children continue to die. I mean, almost, if I mistake not, I think around 18% of the Maharashtra population is still marked as below poverty line. So can you please explain, since you have a long experience as a finance minister, you are responsible for allocations, what are the difficulties and how do we overcome? Obviously, it is not a criticism, but with the idea of understanding how to overcome these things. Thank you.
When before budget, the state used to, now I don't know what are the procedures after Niti Aayog has come in the picture, but then we used to ask all the departments what is their expectation for the year's planning. So the planned funding which used to be allocations to each individual departments was based on the demands which we used to receive from various departments. Now, obviously the politicians sitting inside the ministry, they always want to impress their, they're not individual constituencies, but they think that giving money to education, giving money to all the social causes is not which will receive votes to them. I am speaking very frankly. But what will give votes to them, what will bring votes to them is the infrastructure. So the trend, Indian politicians' trend has changed, and now there is a lot of emphasis upon building infrastructure like roads, airports, ports, whatever the infrastructure list covers. So the problem before finance minister is always how to balance the demand from the education department, health department, social sectors, and the infrastructure departments. And when we start talking about, for example, let's take example of the state of Maharashtra. Maharashtra has created or seen a dream of being the largest irrigated state in India. So we have spent a lot of money on irrigation, yet we need to spend more money on irrigation. So there is a major demand from irrigation department which keeps on asking about 10 to 12,000, 14,000 crore rupees. Then there is a department of road, and then there is a department of drinking water. So these sectors are the main infrastructure departments which are driving the finance minister's decisions. And therefore, the social sectors, even if health department asks for some special different scheme, unless and until that scheme is going to be popular amongst masses, that scheme doesn't receive enough attention from the department or from the decision makers. So now it's like previously it used to be test bench. People used to wait for 5 days result. Now people and we politicians also don't want to wait for 5 days result. We want a yearly result. So when as a finance minister I stand and present my budget, I expect next day morning I should be praised by all the media, and especially pink especially Economic Times and Financial Express should speak not bad about me. So these are the constraints. But we used to decide 5 years policies, and 5-year planning was Atma of Indian planning. And in that 5-year planning, I remember it was 3 times done when I was finance minister. And we had created limits which can give due justice for the social sectors. And that was very thoroughly discussed amongst all the departments. And whenever, but I must admit, whenever there is financial crunch, the first affected department or departments are the social sectors. I remember from 95 to 99, when the then government started talking about larger and better infrastructure in the form of flyovers, irrigation, and Tanker Mukta Maharashtra, that is everywhere drinking water schemes. That time the first hit was received by the health department, the tribal welfare department, and education department. So that time I had presented a white paper in 99 December where we had mentioned these aspects, like when there is a financial crunch, how people start taking decisions and how these sectors are deprived of funds.
And I agree that whatever you explained, but can you tell us that in case if you want to change it, those who are at least not necessarily part of the government, what we should be doing?
Now what happens is lately you must have observed that malnutrition has become a problem, and concerned minister's constituency also, we have seen death of 148 children. So when these types of news start appearing, everybody starts waking up. And then what to do is the discussion which always is the practice, unfortunately, in the government. I remember we had set up a mission in 2006, I think. The mission which was to take care of Human Development Index of all the districts. And we had given special grants to this Human Development Index, special authorities to decide the fate of the person who is working as officer on various levels in taluka and district levels. and where health, education, we have also seen, especially in Marathwada, the Human Development Index was very poor, and about 2-3 districts in Vidarbha and 1 district of Nandurbar. So these districts were concentrated, and institutionalized delivery was one of the aspects, and we saw a drastic change and improvement in various factors in those 5 years. So a constant effort with authority at not state level but at regional level should be the system which we should create. And we have experienced that when we had set this Human Development Index improvement mission, whose office was in Aurangabad, that mission has shown fantastic results across Marathwada and Nandurbar and other places. I think Dr. Bhange was the head, and he was so devoted that he was a fantastic person. I have very rarely come across officers like him. But after him, it has just declined. So maybe after 2010, it has gone down again. So the government should become serious. The finance and planning minister should take every year. Dr. Bhoge used to brief me every 6 months what he has done. And he used to come up with suggestions, ki Mala, give me these authorities. I want to, I am not getting cooperation from this level, that level. So we used to immediately issue the orders and support his mission. Now, I don't know what is happening within the government, but it looks like it has come down. That mission also, I am not aware whether it is existing or not, discontinued.
Actually, unfortunately, I could not make my presentation when you were there. I made the presentation on health, public health in Maharashtra. I'm Dr. Abhay Shukla. So actually I had a few questions. One is that the ICDS budget this year, we saw a 62% cut. And in your experience, has there been such a steep cut in any social sector program in Maharashtra? Because it was completely, extremely surprising. And in fact,
as far as the social sectors are concerned, social sectors were concerned, I was not a good finance minister till 2003-04. Because I was not, I must admit. But in 2003, my first 3 budgets, I was not so serious about these social sectors. But when in Nagpur, my secretary said, sir, you remember we had given order to do survey in Maharashtra, and now that book is ready, that we have to inaugurate, unveil that book. I said, okay, take 10-15 minutes, not more than that. Yes, he said. And he arranged one function in Nagpur. And this Human Development Index survey, which was conducted, probably I think that was the first time it was done for Maharashtra state, district level, district-wise. And not YESHDA, some organization, and state of Maharashtra. So that was published in 2002, December. So I had gone for the function as a formality, and my other functions were waiting for me. And I did the inauguration, and the secretary of our department gave a small speech, and I was just going through the book, and then I was shocked. and I said no, I want to see the presentation, and they gave a detailed presentation. The meeting lasted for almost 2.5 hours, and then I realized what Maharashtra is. And then thereafter, we changed our policy of allocation. After, if you see little in depth, 2003-4 budget was all about social sector spending. A very small schemes we launched. Mr. Sushil Kumar Shinde was Chief Minister then, and he also said, no, if you think so, we should do that. And then we came out with a fantastic budget. 90% insistence was on social spending, and people started calling it as an election budget, but election was almost 1.5 years away from us. So thereafter, I remember never ever we cut social sector spending. In fact, after 2004, we were presenting surplus budget. So that question also did not come. Almost till 2000, as far as I remember, 10 or 11, the budgets were surplus. So this cut business was not there at all. Previously in 2001, 2, 3, I used to cut budget 40%, 30%, 20%, and ministers used to come to my cabin not for asking additional allocation. They used to come to request कि अभी इसके आगे cut मत करो. So after 2004, I was the finance minister who used to call ministers and secretaries and ask why you have not spent the money. So that started once we started presenting surplus budget. So it is, but not to 60% and 62%. This is very serious.
Some of us, that many of the flagship programs which are launched between 2005 and 2010-11, so NREGA, NRHM, Right to Education, these are 3 major social sector programs, and the last is Food Security Act, which was launched a little late, but that is also somewhere in that whole period. So these flagship programs, are they going to flag? Are they already flagging? or will they, because these are all very important initiatives which we had all expected that, and they have started making some impact. Although they did not maybe get enough time, but at least they were making some impact. So what is the future of these programs? Are they going to be continued or not? Because budget is very important for all of these programs. And the last question is that how can we, as you have very correctly pointed out, that politicians may not look at some of these social sectors very attractively. So how can we make our proposals politically attractive? Like for example, and it should be possible, something which is going to benefit ordinary people should logically be politically attractive also, but somehow if it is not happening, like for example, Maharashtra Saglyanna Mufat Aushadha Miltil Pratyek Dawakhanet. Why cannot such a thing, slogan along with the appropriate program be politically attractive? At least in some states, some politicians have done some such thing, but somehow in Maharashtra there seems to be a little disconnect between what happens in the social sphere and what happens in the political sphere. So can you give some suggestions about how we can make social sector demands more politically attractive?
I will just add one sub-question on that since we have many countries which are also like India or which were also like India, I'm sure that their politicians were no greatly different. Yet they spent significantly high on education as well as health. So if you could add that also in your explanations.
I don't know what is the situation in other countries, but one thing I am very sure, Indian population has a very small memory, short memory, not small, short memory. So if you ask anybody sitting here, what did you read, which news did you like yesterday morning? Not today morning, but yesterday morning, we won't remember. So this is the exact situation the politicians take disadvantage of. So there are 2 things. In not because I am in opposition, but I remember Dr. Manmohan Singh's government for 10 years had given more priority to the social spendings in social sectors. I have seen many times that he used to express concern in our meetings that, okay, you are doing this, but what is happening in tribal area? What are you doing this? He used to ask direct questions to me because I had gone when he was not finance minister and he was at home. I had gone to take his suggestion. So he knows me by first name. So he used to always say, no, this irrigation, all this will happen. But what about the social spendings? So I remember that most of the decisions in 2009 to 2014 were more focused on social spendings and more focused on the rural infrastructure. And NRHM and all these schemes are product of that government's concept. Now the names are being changed, but probably they must be aware that what are the important aspects of the social sector which they should keep in mind. So any government comes, the numbers never change. So with that number being the guiding force of individual department, I don't think the shift can be changed so easily. But with some drastic decisions like demonetization, if government collects less revenue and they have to cut those spending, and the first spending cut comes on social sector.
Done the discussion paper on the need for district human development mission for the backward districts of Maharashtra in 2005. That's how the Aurangabad sector came up. I basically wanted to get your views on a couple of issues. In fact, in last 2 years, TISS has been also working on the devolution index for all states in India, and I was looking at the Maharashtra dimension. Very clearly, there seems to be a chaos between rural development, DRGF regions, tribal sub-plan, and scheduled caste component plans. There seems to be a lack of understanding that convergence does not mean reduction of resources, but effective utilization of money. Somewhere we seem to be losing out on the devolution of dimensions as compared to other states in India because of this lacking in it. As to how do you implement programs. In fact, when you look at the tribal area outcomes, significantly we find that resources are not being spent because there's an assumption that the partial districts may have the general budget which is also be taking care of those categories. There seems to be some chaos about how do they really allocate resources effectively. That's one. Secondly, when you're talking about the current regime speaking about strengthening infrastructure development, we have been part of the G20 negotiations also, where we are saying that let's talk about sustainable infrastructure development, which talks about economic and non-economic dimensions. Because the kind of expenditures that we are incurring on training of personnel, linked with social services, that seems to be a decline. In fact, if you do the sub-budget analysis, there's a lot of spending on administration, but very little on training and manpower strengthening. So that's where there seems to be a certain lacking. Can we talk a little more effectively about the sub-budgets rather than the aggregate budgets? Because the fine prints are saying a completely different story. And the last component which I wanted to again take you through is that the entire, the sustainable development goals which are the reality for us, it's Assam which has championed the cause. I think Maharashtra for some reason is no longer leading in some of the core development agendas. In devolution index, you find Tamil Nadu and Kerala taking away the lead, and HDI Kerala forever is the leading story. Where is Maharashtra as a leading, the design for SDGs seems to be completely left out. The reason why I'm saying this is, if we introduce monitoring and evaluation as a significant component, which even China is doing at the localized level, I think we'll be able to track it better. Because the last BPL survey was done in 2002, agricultural census in 2001, NFHS we are still relying on 2005, 2006 to talk about 2017 planning. So are we somewhere not understanding the importance of monitoring?
I will give you one example that BPL survey of 1996 is still being used for ration, and BPL survey of 2002 is used for giving houseless people their houses, homes. So I made an attempt to bring 96 survey to 2002 level, and next survey was I think 2000 recently 12 or something. So that survey was very seriously done, and we used to monitor in our department because I was rural development department then. So rural Maharashtra survey we used to monitor. So what we realize is there is lot of confusion in the poor people, and they always try to get into the list which is beneficial and which will give them more advantages. Now, as you said, Government of India has come out with various schemes, and Narega say backward district regional grant scheme, that district wise allot BRGF, that scheme. Now, government